It's my privilege to introduce Jay Haapala, who is the Associate State Director of Community Engagement at AARP. And he leads their Fraud Watch Network program, which serves to educate consumers about fraud, scams, and identity theft. He and AARP fraud fighters volunteers have met with hundreds of community groups, law enforcement officials, and fraud investigators, continually learning how people are being targeted by these criminals. He has worked and served in the nonprofit sector for 20 years. He's been building volunteer programs, and now he is doing the same to build a network of fraud fighters with AARP. Please join me in welcoming Jay.
Thanks, Deb. Appreciate it. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the nice introduction and welcome from Deb. What a nice event. What a nice day it is here in Golden Valley. It's good to be with you. So I do work with AARP, and we have an office in Minnesota, just like what you do in all other 50 states. And most people, I think, understand about the magazine, AARP the magazine, or some of the discount programs that we offer. But really, all of that funding that we generate goes into our nonprofit operations. So through our state office and across the nation, AARP is working with state legislatures and also with members of Congress to make sure that older people have representation in the issues that are facing us all. So we're nonpartisan in that work. Instead of endorsing candidates or giving political contributions to campaigns, what we do is write our own policies, and then we try to get members of both parties to support them. And here in Minnesota last year, the way we did that was to pass the paid family and medical leave law that is coming into effect. We passed a new retirement savings program called Secure Choice. So this is for the increasing group of people getting their paychecks at employers who do not offer retirement savings programs, thus creating a real crisis for people as they get older and they don't have any savings to live off of. So we are solving that problem, at least in one way, with the Secure Choice program here in Minnesota. And perhaps the most popular bill we were able to pass last year was a reduction in the amount of state income tax that people will be paying on their Social Security benefits. So we do that legislative advocacy work. Yeah, thank you. And you're really applauding for yourselves because we do this all with volunteers. We help our volunteers have that voice with their lawmakers and make sure that these are the policies that are at the top of the list. So in addition to that, we do our community outreach work, and that's my job. We listen to our members and find out what issues are important to them, and then we try to put resources behind them. And when it comes to fraud and identity theft that we're talking about today, whenever we survey our members and ask what they're interested in and ask them what they're concerned about, fraud and identity theft are always at the top of that list. So for many years now, we've run a helpline that's available nationally on weekdays, and we get up to 1,000 reports every single week of the type of scams that people are seeing, whether they need help trying to discern is the email that they're looking at or the piece of mail that came to their mailbox or who the person calling on the telephone. If they need help to figure out whether they might be facing a scam, we help them sort that out. And then, of course, when people have been victimized and they've lost money, they can call us for help to figure out where they should go to report and get assistance from the right government agency. Because there's a real challenge that people face when they've been victimized. There are more than 40 different government agencies who say that they have a role, that they are the ones that victims should call when they've been victimized and they lost money. But in reality, there's often little or no help for people. The money's long gone, and the best we can do is make a report and stop it from happening again. So that's why it's so important for all of you to come to a session like this, because you can learn what gets reported to AARP and all the research we're doing on these scams and financial crime. And then you can pass it along with your friends and neighbors. And the more we can do just to spread the word and keep people informed about the type of scams that are targeting us right now, the safer that everyone's going to be. And maybe that's obvious, but our research shows that upwards of 90% of people will not answer the phone or not get involved with the scam if they've heard about it before. So that's pretty obvious. But the importance of education is what that demonstrates. So with that, kind of the agenda for today is I want to talk a lot about the background and the issues underlying all of this fraud. So why is it increasing? What's going on? We'll talk about the specific scams that have been reported to us and other law enforcement agencies recently. And then by the end, we'll make sure that we talk about how people can protect themselves, because over my years doing this type of education, there's a 3-step process that I encourage people to follow. It doesn't cost any money. And yeah, people can do this for free. And it really focuses on our consumer protections that we have in this country, which are very strong. But they only work if people are aware of how they work. It's not just about knowing every single scam under the sun, because no one is going to be able to recognize them all. But instead, if we focus on how our money is protected by laws in the United States of America, then we can understand where to focus our time and how to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe from all of this crime. And it really has been increasing. So before the pandemic, that's one. We'll see how many times I reference the pandemic today. We'll try to keep it under 3. But before these recent years, I would rarely talk about the quantity of reports that are being filed, the total amount of money that we estimate is being lost to these scams, because it's unreliable to an extent. The majority of people don't even report when they've lost money for various reasons, whether it's the difficulty they find reporting to the right agency, whether the agency that they reach says we don't investigate fraud, or whether it's the embarrassment and the shame that people face because they've become the victim of a scam. So that's real, and because of that, a lot of our data has been unreliable. But now what we're seeing is a big trend in how even the unreliable reports are increasing. So I have a technical problem. And what you see here is, in a nutshell, between 2019 and 2022, in those intervening years, the amount of dollars lost to fraud in the United States of America increased by 366%. And that is a big wake-up call. Back in the early 2000 teens, I wouldn't be talking about these trends. Sure, we could see them increasing a little bit year over year. We were getting better at taking reports and collecting all this data through the Federal Trade Commission, but it has skyrocketed 366% in a few short years. And to pile on top of that, in 2022, there were fewer individual reports than there were in 2021, so the amount of dollars lost per person reporting the fraud increased, and it also kind of puts my theory, it refutes my theory about the data being unreliable, because if we had fewer reports and more dollars, it shows that it really is increasing. So what this tells me is that everyone here and everyone in our country ought to be paying a lot closer attention to how these scams work and how we are vulnerable as individuals or as leaders with the people that we serve to all of these scams and the way they are increasing. Now, I mentioned the Federal Trade Commission, and they track all of this data. And another interesting statistic that they reported on this year was the age of people reporting their losses. And you've all heard the assumption, which is incorrect, that older people are targeted and victimized more than younger people. It's an ageist kind of belief that older people are losing cognition, that they're too trusting, that they're vulnerable for other reasons, they're lonely, so they want to talk to scammers on the phone. That's all a bunch of ageist BS, because in fact, what we showed this year through millions of reports of fraud losses is that people in the age group between 20 and 39 reported being victimized 2 times as often as people over the age of 70. So young people and older people and everyone is being scammed just the same. And I would argue that especially people like my stepdaughter, who's 15 years old and put her credit card information into the wrong website and didn't really think twice about it other than to work with the bank and get her money back, that these are the type of scams and frauds that we're all facing. So don't let anyone tell you that older people are more vulnerable than younger people to scams and fraud. And in fact, older people can really be leaders in their family and talk with the younger generations about everything you know about staying safe, whether it's about what you might learn here today or just what you've always known about being safe from crime. So it really is a crisis level. So what created this issue is what I call a perfect storm, for lack of a more original phrase, I guess. But these were created by the pandemic. And in normal times, these are what scammers and con artists have to work very hard to create. But our isolation was created for us. Everyone was more isolated than we were before, and I count myself inside that group of people being more isolated. You know, I'd be in rooms like this with people like you, and that all stopped while I was working from home more frequently, and it still persists today because I do spend more time working at home. And I realized something while I was doing that, and it has to do with that ageism, expecting that older people are being targeted and victimized more, is that availability. So when I was available more, when I was at my home office doing Zoom meetings, if my cell phone rang, I was more likely to look at it and answer it than if I was here with you. So if a person's retired, they just are more available to be answering the phone, to be reading their emails and noticing the scams that are targeting them. So that is what was created for us as well. That fear and uncertainty is that emotional response that the scammers need to generate out of people. But when we couldn't even trust the differing messages that we're hearing from our trusted leaders, then it created that environment of uncertainty that makes all of us more vulnerable to fraud. And then it's also about using more and more anonymous technology. And I'm not saying it's dangerous to use video conferencing software like Zoom, but I am saying it is a tool that the scammers can use to reach their victims anonymously and very efficiently, and at very little to no cost. They use that technology to victimize people. Same with the payment systems, and you'll be hearing a lot more about me talking about payment systems today, because our laws and policies just have not kept up with the new ways that we're paying. So using systems such as PayPal and Zelle and Venmo, which is the one I tend to use, not that that's any kind of endorsement, they're all really the same in that sense. But we don't have real policies that guide liability for those type of fraud losses. So right now, in fact, the company that operates Zelle, which is funded by a lot of the big banks, they are disputing that the laws governing card transactions apply to fraud victims that send their money using Zelle as a way to send it. So if you looked at your bank statement today and you saw that your credit or your debit card was charged for $100 that you didn't authorize, there's going to be some inconvenience, but you're going to get your money back. Some of the banks right now are saying if that transaction happened through Zelle, that they're not going to reimburse those people for their losses. And Congress has sent an inquiry on to the company that runs that business, and they're working through how they can create new laws or clarify the existing laws to show who's liable for all of that fraud going on. So that's just one example. But we all are vulnerable, and the stress is when people are most vulnerable. I can't tell you how many fraud victims that I've talked to. Smart people have their stuff together, usually make good decisions, but they tell a story about how they were scammed, and it's because they were stressed out. The last time that I had unauthorized charges on my work credit card, it was because I was getting ready for a big event that we were hosting, and one of our members needed tickets for it, and so I quickly tried to order tickets on my cell phone, and I clicked on the wrong pop-up ad on the website that just said continue, and then it asked for my credit card number, and I assumed I was logged into the account, and it was all because I was so stressed out and in a hurry that I was scammed. I had my credit card information stolen. Of course, because of our strong liability laws, I was not responsible for those transactions, and my credit card company recognized them before they sent the money, so they didn't lose money either. So let's talk about what the scammers are after, and it's obvious that they want your money. So if they can get you to put cash into an envelope and send it through the mail, they will take it, but it's not all that they want. So let me just take a sort of a sidestep here and say, one, when I say you, I don't necessarily mean I think you are going to be scammed or that you are vulnerable to scams. So I hope you can look past that and just think of us as a community here trying to work together to keep everyone safe. And then two, I don't want to scare anyone. So these issues can be scary, and it's almost like there's no hope, but there is hope, and with education, everyone can be safer. And when we have conversations about money with each other, we're keeping everyone safer as well. So let's try to keep that lens going throughout as well. So they want your money, we all know that, but they also want your personal information, and this is identity theft, whether they're going to use your name and social security number and date of birth to try to access your money, or to create a new account in your name, or to steal someone else's money anonymously. That's what identity theft is all about. But it doesn't end there. They also want access to your devices. So I'll bet everyone here has seen an Amazon imposter scam. You get an email, it looks like a receipt in your inbox. It says, "Thank you for your order. We will be shipping your new iPhone 15 to an address in California within a few short weeks. But if you want to cancel this order, or if you think there's been an error, all you have to do is call us." So it's just some scammer who made up an email that looks like an Amazon receipt. Most people don't go any farther than ignoring the email, but when people do call that phone number, it often leads to in an interaction with a scammer over the phone, and they tell their victim to go to the computer, go to a website, and that website allows them to share access to their device, and that could lead to any number of issues, from identity theft to accessing other accounts. But that software is legitimate. It's made for a good purpose, so that, for example, my tech department in California can fix my computer remotely if I need it. But the scammers use that same technology as well, and they could use it to access their victims' devices. They also want access to accounts. So that's what a lot of the phishing emails are for. Or if you've received an email from one of your friends or maybe a family member, and they might be asking you, because they're in an emergency, they need you to send them some money to help them out. Or they might say, "I need to buy some gift cards for my cousin's birthday, and I can't buy them, so could you do me a favor and go pick up some of these gift cards so I have a gift for my friend?" Those people who are sending those emails or having their account used to send their emails, they often say, "Well, I got hacked." You see that on Facebook, right? "Hey, everyone, alert. I've been hacked. Don't listen to anyone who's trying to pretend to be me." They weren't hacked in the sense that some computer whiz scammer was able to break into their account. Instead, as the Social Security Administration showed, over 90% of those cases where people think they've been hacked, it's actually that they were convinced to share access to their account by responding to some request for their username and password. So the vast majority of people who believe they've been hacked, or somehow, some way, a scammer has gained access to their account, it's because they were tricked into sharing too much information about how to access the account. It would be a big waste of time for scammers to be trying to hack into all of our accounts and our passwords, when it's way easier to send out mass emails to lists of people that they have stolen or purchased, and just say, "Time to update your password. Why don't you respond to this form and click on this website and enter your new password, and we'll fix it all up for you." That's way easier, and it doesn't take a lot of technical expertise. So they also want clicks and likes, and I don't know, I think the presidential election campaign season is underway, we could say that. And in the 2020 and 2016 presidential elections, they just make a good example about like farming. We call it like farming when imposters are creating social media profiles to build up their following before they shift the content of their social media profile over to something more damaging. So some scams are designed to get you and me to click on Facebook profiles or to click on social media sites, adding to the popularity of those sites through the algorithm they use to determine what everyone sees. And in some of those cases, I was so puzzled when I saw the gift card sweepstakes on Facebook. It's like, what's the purpose of this? Everyone's supposed to like and share this for a chance to win a $500 Target gift card. Or in other cases, it was for a chance to win an RV, like a big camper vehicle. How would that make any sense? Well, they're just imposters, and they were using those fake sweepstakes to generate a lot of likes and clicks. And then once they reached sort of a critical mass of popularity, they would completely switch over the content into something really bad, like showing fake stories about America in peril, or convincing people about things that were just untrue. So that's what those type of sweepstakes you see on social media are all about. And they also want to recruit money mules. So this, for 3-4 years now, every time I talk with our colleagues at the Minnesota Department of Commerce or with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, and I ask them, what's going on? What are you working on these days? And they are saying they are tracing money mules. So I live in Woodbury, and our detective in Woodbury got a phone call, this was about a year ago, from the Philadelphia Police Department, because they were tracing money being scammed from people in Philadelphia to Woodbury, Minnesota. And what the detective found out was that it was this young 20-something man, and he was working from home, or at least he thought so in the beginning, and his job was to take payments into his own bank account and send them to the next place. And that was his job, just moving that money, and he could keep 10% of it or something, but by the time they investigated, they even found out he was in big credit card debt because the scammers had him taking out advances on his credit cards to make his payments that he was supposed to be making. And those are money mules. So the scammers are recruiting sometimes well-meaning people, other times people who are looking the other way, but they are working from home and their job is to transfer money, and it makes it very difficult for law enforcement to trace where all the funds are going. So it's not just the money the scammers are after. And part of the point here too is that just about any of the scams I'm about to describe could be designed to achieve any one of these goals. It's a real organized crime industry. They specialize in different areas. They're doing business with each other, buying and selling information. And many more of these scams are originating in the United States. So I've noticed that just with my own kind of observation, is that even 4 or 5 years ago, if you looked at most scam emails like Geek Squad imposters or those Amazon imposters, or other common ones are Best Buy or Norton Antivirus or McAfee, Microsoft, you'd find a lot of spelling errors. You'd find a lot of language that didn't make sense for someone who spoke English as a first language. And you'd see problems with the logos and design. And now almost every one of those emails I see is perfect and very hard to determine from the real thing. So, and my answer to that is 2 parts. The second part I'll get to in a minute, but it's just more scammers who are originating in our country because they figured it out. They learned from the overseas criminals. Okay, so in all of these scams, just like they might be designed to steal money or other goals that the scammers have, there are consistent red flags to look for. Regardless of the story, there's always the heightened emotions. That's how the scammers get their victims to comply. If you've ever met someone who's been involved in a romance scam, you probably think, how can this person be so brainwashed and that they're being controlled by someone they never met in real life? And that's the game. That's what the scammers do. They get people emotionally excited. There's time pressure. They always need to isolate their victims. Again, think about that romance scam person who, if she just went out to lunch and talked with her friends about how she's getting married to this guy that she just met on the internet a month ago, her friends would say, that's probably not a very good idea. But if she is isolated from her friends, she'd be much more likely just to go with it. It happens all the time. In that Federal Trade Commission data where I showed the huge increases, 366% over the last few years, a big part of that is the online relationship scams. So now I'm talking more broadly than just romance scams, but it's fake imposters online, making relationships with people, and getting a lot of money. And a lot of it is the investment scams as well. So I guess I was making a point about isolation, and just those type of scams are really increasing, and that's what's partially leading to the dollar amounts. Our research at AARP shows that the threats are more effective than the promises of getting rich, like if you've won the lottery versus the police are going to come and arrest you because you haven't paid your bills, or you missed out on jury duty, and so now you're in big trouble if you don't pay this fine. The threats are more powerful. And even, I don't know what it says about who these victims are, but it's very common in the cases where someone loses a lot of money because they needed to pay fees to win a prize that didn't exist. These are not people that really needed the money. They're not people who are trying to, live a lavish lifestyle. Oftentimes they say, I went through with it because I thought I could help my family. I went through with it because I thought I could help my church, or I could leave something for my legacy. So anyway, the threats are very powerful. But now I'll talk for the first time about the biggest red flag, and that's the payment method. So all of this crime relies on a couple of things, but one big one is that the scammers remain anonymous. They can't be scamming people and putting money into their own bank accounts. Otherwise, they would get caught. Although there was a case of mail theft, I always love this example because a law enforcement agency, I don't need to name which one, wanted to do a big presentation like this about all the check thieves that they were busting in southern Minnesota. And they told a couple case studies that it was these drug addicts who were going around stealing checks and erasing them and cashing them in their own bank accounts. So we caught them. Great. I asked, do you ever catch someone who used a fake ID to set up a bank account and is stealing checks and cashing them? And they didn't have any examples of that. So sure, the people who are out of their minds doing drugs and cashing checks in their own bank accounts are getting caught, but the ones who put a little extra brains behind it are not. But anyway, anonymous payments. The biggest red flag is if anyone you're dealing with wants to be paid with a gift card, if they want to be paid with a wire transfer, if they want to be paid in cash, if they want to be paid in Bitcoins, and increasingly if they want to be paid in Zelle or PayPal or Venmo, those are all the big red flags. So whenever you hear that, it's time to really step back, slow down, and think twice about what you're doing. Probably talk to someone else about that financial decision, because all of those payment methods allow the scammer to stay anonymous, and they don't have consumer protections on them, so it's no one else's problem but yours if you send that money. Now, like in my example, I gave my credit card number to some weird website, and they charged me $45, and my bank called me before I even knew what happened. Why did the bank call? Because if that would have gone through, the bank would have lost $45, and I would have got my money back. But if you're dealing in gift cards and PayPal and wire transfers and cash and Bitcoins, there's no one else looking out for you because it's your money and not someone else's. So along those lines, always pay when you can with credit cards and debit cards. personal checks and automatic bill pay, because that's where you have the consumer protections. Good question. So she asked about debit cards. So I hear a lot of people in my shoes say always use a credit card, and that's fine and sound advice, but for a different reason. The liability laws for those losses are exactly the same. It has to do with a card transaction. But the advice is use a credit card, because if your bank account was empty for 10 days, that would be a bigger problem for you than if your credit card was maxed out and you just didn't have to pay the bill. So that's the real distinction, but it's the same liability law. Your job as a consumer who holds a card is to pay attention to your transactions and report anything fraudulent within 60 days, and then you're covered according to those liability laws, and it'll be the financial institution that made the mistake of honoring that transaction that you didn't authorize. So what you may be able to see on the screen here is a map of the Golden Valley area. We're right in the middle there on 100 and 394, and all the red dots are Bitcoin ATMs. Why do we have these Bitcoin ATMs when the average person who deals in cryptocurrency can just do it from their iPad, their smartphone, or their laptop? Why do they need to go to the gas station or the grocery store to put their cash in the machine and turn it into Bitcoin? And if someone was working for one of these companies, they would say, well, not everyone is banked, and so it's a great service to these less than privileged people who want to get in on Bitcoins too. But I don't think that's the real answer. I think it's fraud that is supporting this business model of having ATM machines in gas stations and grocery stores where fraud victims are convinced to go to the payment station, put their cash in there, and take a picture of the receipt and send it to the scammer to prove they've done what they said they needed to do to get out of trouble. So that's right in our neighborhood right here. And it's just an example of how we don't have regulations. So nothing says that these companies need to tell anyone how much money is being cycled through these machines. There's no law that says that they need to report it. There is nothing to say a gas station can't be paid sort of a leasing fee to have the machine in their space. And there's nothing to say that even if someone calls the police because they got scammed and they put their money in the machine, that the police could stop the payment or seize the machine, for example. There's nothing to say they can do that. So our regulations just haven't kept up. But what's interesting, out of Brooklyn Park, I think Brooklyn Park or Brooklyn Center, I feel bad. The detective there was able to trace. What's interesting about Bitcoins compared to regular transactions, like through a financial institution, is that the transaction records are public. So if it was like bank fraud, police are likely going to need a warrant to get access to the banking information. But with Bitcoins, they don't need a warrant, because if you know how to read it, the transaction history is online. So out of Brooklyn Park, they were able to trace one of these scams, the money, to the Seychelles Islands. Does anyone know where the Seychelles Islands are? They're on the other side of Africa in the Indian Ocean, sort of north of Madagascar. So that's where this Bitcoin company operates, and they agreed to send back the money to this person who was victimized. So that company apparently wants to do the right thing, and it'll be interesting how this all shakes out once we do catch up on the regulations. So let's talk about specific scams. So during the pandemic, there's 3. I think that's my allotment. Everything else is over the top. A lot of people, the media, certainly wanted to talk about fake vaccines and fake testing kits and all of those type of scams that were, they were happening, but my point is they weren't at the top of the list. They weren't the most popular scams happening during that time. But it made for a good media story. But what we did see big increases with, or sort of a doubling down, was with the retail imposter scams. meaning that Amazon type scam that I just described earlier, or that your shipment is delayed. Who here has got the text from the USPS saying there's a problem with your shipment and we have it down at the station and you gotta text us? So I think that particular text is probably now the top scam happening. But the retail imposters still are. Similar with the delivery, it could look like it's coming from FedEx or the next delivery company that says your delivery is delayed. So give me your information, send a payment, whatever. Any one of those schemes could be what they're getting at. I did briefly describe the I need your help scam, and it has been very popular in the time that people were more isolated because they feel like they wanted to help, but they couldn't. They wanted to get involved, but they couldn't. So if there was something they could do from home, sitting on their computer, on the telephone, they wanted to be able to help. So when they got an email that looked like it was coming from their faith leader, and it said, we're really low on donations for our charity drive, can you just go buy a few gift cards and send me the numbers? People were jumping in on that. Now, tech support scams are still very popular. People get pop-up advertisements on their computer, and it says their computer has a virus and they need to click on the button and call the phone number to get their computer fixed. And that's another way that the scammers get access to their device or get access to their accounts. So definitely still happening. So I mentioned here that online relationship scams, I call them that instead of romance scams, because when I ask everyone here, please raise your hand if you're dating online, no one raises their hand, either because they're not or because they don't want anyone to know. But it is very true that more and more older folks are dating online. However, these scams are happening outside of the dating websites now. So it used to, there's a lot of different dating websites, and long story short, those companies that run those websites have gotten much better about verifying their users because it was a sort of competitive advantage to be one of the dating sites that everyone is verified, and you're not just going to get scammed by trying to meet people on our dating site. So the scammers have migrated elsewhere, certainly social media, trying just to make friends with people, and into gaming type websites. So if you play cards online, I guess anything but solitaire that you can play with someone else and you're interacting and you have a profile name and you can maybe make friends with people. There's a woman in California that I sometimes play Scrabble with because we are about the same level. So that's where the scammers are more today than they have been before. And it's not always romantic. It could just be friendly. Like there are plenty of cases where people meet playing cards and then they say we should play cards in person, and then the scammer makes up some emergency and why they need money, and they just need a little bit, but they'll come pay you back when they visit. So that is happening. And like I said, I wish I did have that graph because the increase in losses in these online relationship scams are really astronomical. And combining them with investment fraud, some of the biggest scams, you probably read about the one in Eden Prairie where the couple lost $9.2 million. It was the biggest individual scam, like targeting a person in our state's history. That was just this summer. $9.2 million, so it started with an online relationship. The husband who got into it was still married, but he was talking with this other woman online, apparently. In the end, she was trying to convince him to leave his wife and come move with her or something. But in the meantime, when they lost the $9.2 million, it was something like 20 transactions into Bitcoins, essentially. But the scammer had set up a fake website that was designed to take deposits of his money and then basically show a chart as though his investments were going up and up and up, until he tried to take the money out, and there was just a fake website that had nothing to do with taking his money out. $9.2 million right in Eden Prairie. So then also I just have to point out that government imposter scams have just stayed very strong, whether they're impersonating the IRS or who knows what. I think there were some imposters with the Minnesota Department of Human Services sending messages about getting vaccine data. Certainly the Social Security Administration, government imposters. Could be designed to achieve a lot of different goals for the scammers. So more of the trending scams we're seeing, there were a lot in the news in the Twin Cities about home repair over the summer. In Minnetonka, it was the Minnetonka police that finally arrested these two guys. For some reason, it stands out that they were from England, and they were in the West Metro over here going door to door telling people that they would give them a free home inspection and see if they qualify for roof repair. And it started to unravel when one homeowner agreed actually to have them fix her roof, but when she walked around the side of the house, she found evidence that they had been actually breaking things on her roof in order to then fix them. So those guys got arrested in Minnetonka. But I guess when it comes to home repair and staying safe from that, people just got to slow down and get multiple quotes in writing from companies that you can verify with the Better Business Bureau or elsewhere. But it's tough. I know I had roof damage, and it was kind of hard to resist all the guys knocking on my door saying they wanted to fix it, and I got to decide right now. And you're going to be last in line if you don't decide now. So that was, I understand how that works. All right, who wants to talk about artificial intelligence? So you've all seen the 60 Minutes episode and other news reports about how artificial intelligence is going to impersonate your grandson's voice and call you and say he's being held hostage and that you have to send money or else they're going to murder him or something like that. Makes for a pretty scary news story. But before anyone's voice had been impersonated by artificial intelligence, I can't tell you how many scam victims I talked to who were absolutely convinced that it was their grandson's voice on the phone. It doesn't take fancy computer technology to get people convinced under that kind of stress, going through that type of a situation to believe that they are hearing their grandson's voice. So I don't think that is the danger of artificial intelligence. At least two ways where I think it is dangerous is that's the other reason why the emails are looking so good now, is because they're using computers to build them, to write them, and that's why they look like they're coming from someone who's part of our culture and not living in an Eastern European country or something. And then the other piece is that it will be a part of spear phishing type of attacks. So phishing is like a mass market. I'm going to email all of you and tell you you have to send me your password. But spear phishing is where you target one person, usually someone who's wealthy, often a business leader who has access to corporate money, for example. And that artificial intelligence can basically write a book report on that person's whole life, so the scammer can then craft a message like they're an old high school friend because they know a lot of details about their target's life. So I think that's where this is going to come into play. And then also just like for the masses to generate video and voices of well-known people, presidential candidates or whatnot, that's dangerous too. But my main point is I don't think everyone needs to worry about what's going, like their grandson calling on the phone telling grandma that he's in trouble. So real estate and travel and car rentals are similar type of scams. They're just fake postings on websites. One of our volunteers north of St. Cloud has an actual rental apartment that she rents out. And they put up an ad on all the real estate websites trying to get a new renter. And she showed up to do a showing for an interested person. And the sheriff was in there, ready to bust her because someone else had put that posting, used the picture and said, this apartment's up for rent. And for the victims who were involved with that, they were told, you got to put a security deposit down right now. I have other interested buyers. If you don't do this today, it's going to be gone. And so the sheriff, it was her, so she had to prove that she wasn't the one scamming people. But that's just an example of a real estate type scam. And then similar with like people end up buying a vacation because it's a great deal on the website, and then they show up and they don't have a reservation because it was just a fake website. And same with car rentals. One of my other volunteers, she went to Las Vegas, and it was during the time that car rentals were very scarce. So she found one, but it was this weird website she never heard of. And when she went to the address, it was just an empty parking lot. So not only was she out the few hundred she paid for the car, but then she had to go pay extra high prices to get a car on very short notice. And wouldn't you know it, the same is happening with puppy dogs and kitty cats. They're just fake postings that say, we have a litter of 4 puppies, there's 1 left, and if you want it, you better pay $500 right now. And then tomorrow you'll get a bill for the vaccinations, and then tomorrow you'll get a bill for the shipping. My dog is now 4 years old, and my wife was on a waiting list in Canada to get this Aussie Doodle puppy. And then we found one a lot closer to home. So I don't even know if that was a scam or not. But we were out a couple $100 just being on the waiting list. All right, so let's talk about how we all can protect ourselves. This is really where the rubber hits the road. We could talk all day about all the tricky scams and all the new ways they're coming up with to victimize people. It's interesting, it's important. Like I said, the more people know about specific scams, the less likely they are to get involved or lose any money. But this is where I recommend people focus and make sure they don't lose any money regardless of what's going on with fraud. So do these 3 steps. You don't have to do anything else, and these don't cost any money. So number 1 is you monitor your bank accounts. That's the contract between you and your financial institution. And this goes for your checking, your savings, your credit accounts, and your investment accounts. And like I said once, you get 60 days to report any fraudulent activity. So if you look at your statement once a month, you're covered. If you notice something suspicious, you report it to the bank or whatever institution, and then from that point forward, they get 10 days to investigate. And that's important that they are going to investigate, because otherwise the scammers wouldn't need you and me. They'd just be making fake reports to the banks about having been defrauded. So the bank will investigate, but at 10 days, they have to refund the money or replace the money that was stolen and that was not authorized. And that's the law in our country. Now, if someone physically has your ATM card and the PIN number, because you gave them the PIN number, or if someone physically steals your credit card and starts using it, whether it's at the point of sale or online or wherever, if you can't show that you still have the card and that it wasn't stolen, you only get 2 days to report it. And so that might not seem like a lot of time, but you check you have all your cards with you every couple days, and if you don't, you got to report to the bank right away. Otherwise, someone who's spending it could be your liability for those losses. So that covers, I say, about 70% of your liability, because it's all the money you have, it's all the credit you have access to right now, but it doesn't cover your identity. So the reason you check your credit report is to make sure someone is not using your identity to get someone else's money, to buy a house in your name. Like what happened in Wayzata, for example, with a retired person whose employer had records stolen, and then she wasn't drawing on her retirement right away, so she didn't notice right away that $500,000 was gone from her retirement account, and someone had tried to launder the money by doing real estate deals. She got it back, but she said it took 5 years to get the money back. But anyway, you got to check your credit report, because it would tell you. Now, often people say, well, my bank or my credit card company shows me my credit score whenever they send me my monthly statement, and that's fine. But that's great. It's a nice service, but it really doesn't have to do with identity theft. What you need to look at on your free credit report is the accounts that are open in your name. So when I first checked my credit report, I was in my 20s, I suppose. I saw that I had a First National Bank credit card open, and I don't remember having that. Well, I had signed up for it when I was in college and just never used it, but it was open in my name, so we closed it. That's what you're looking for, are there accounts open in your name that you don't recognize, And if that's the case, then you start the process of investigating and get the accuracy fixed.
Why aren't you recommending freezing those?
I'm not recommending freezing your credit. So now, because Equifax screwed up and had a big data breach, our federal government says all these credit reporting bureaus have to offer people for free the opportunity to freeze their credit. But I'll take a step back from that. Why do we have credit reporting agencies in the first place? Is it legal for you and me to collect financial information about other people and sell it back and forth? No, the banking information is protected and it can't be sold. But for credit reporting bureaus who are authorized by law to serve the financial industry by keeping records on you and me about our credit worthiness. So we have authorized these companies to profit off of your financial information. But we've decided that's important for our banking industry to operate, that they need to verify people's credit worthiness. But now we have some consumer protections that say you can disallow them from buying and selling your information by freezing your credit, and you don't have to pay them to do that. So that's what this is about. And it's a good idea if you are not planning to take out a new line of credit, you're not going to buy a new house or a car or whatever, open a new credit card in the near future. It's a good idea to freeze your credit. And essentially what you're getting is a password that when you do want to open up a new line of credit, you need that extra factor of authentication in order to reauthorize them to sell your information back and forth. Let me wrap up the rest of this story and then we'll do as much questions and such that you want. The website is annualcreditreport.com. So what is that, 4 words? Annualcreditreport.com. 5 words. Don't go searching for free credit reports because you'll find a lot of fake websites that will charge you $20 to get your free credit report for you, or they'll steal your information. So it's annualcreditreport.com, and people can also order them by phone. I don't have that phone number memorized. You could call our Fraud Watch helpline. I scattered a few brochures on the railings here, and they'll tell you whatever phone numbers you want to know. So that covers you really well until you start messing around with the payment types. So the third piece of the puzzle here is to stay within the banking system. Always pay with personal checks, credit and debit cards, and automatic bill pay, where you have the strongest consumer protections against unauthorized transactions. And whenever someone says, please pay me, or demands to be paid with gift cards and wire transfers and cash, Bitcoins, and those peer-to-peer payment apps, that's where you have a big red flag. Now let me say one more thing about the peer-to-peer apps. They're not dangerous to use them properly. I use them with my friends. I use them with my wife. We send money back and forth when we need to. However, it's dangerous to send money to a stranger using those. A common Facebook marketplace scam is about transferring money using Venmo or Zelle and then not receiving the items that you purchased, and then the bank isn't trying to clamp down on the person who stole the money because they feel like they're not liable for it until we get new clarity on that issue. So it's not dangerous, it's a good tool to use. It's really important for sort of global small business transactions. I bought a hockey jersey once in advance of the Olympics, and by the time it arrived, I realized I bought it in the Philippines, and it was shipped to Singapore, and then it came like to Copenhagen, and then it finally got to me after the Olympics were done. But what that did was hide my credit card information from all these people around the world who could be in Russia or China, in places that are at odds with America, and they are trying to victimize American people through those type of websites. So that's the service those are providing, but we still need more clarity on the liability issues. So someone had their hand up over here, yeah? I read a little bit about the U of M data breach. So a lot of people who were on staff or students at the U of M during a window of time had some of their information stolen. I think it was still not reported last time I looked on exactly what information was stolen, whether it was social security numbers or whatnot. You know, it's kind of become a common practice in our country when there is a big data breach that they have to pay for everyone to have credit monitoring, and that's fine. It's probably not enough of an incentive for them to get better security, but that's what I know about it. But let me say more about the data breaches. It was only President Obama who first signed the law that said if a company has a data breach that they have to tell anyone. So that's how new this is. Back, 15 years ago, a company had a data breach, they could just hide it from everyone and they didn't have to say anything. Now they have to report it within 30 days so people know about it, and then general practices provide some identity theft protection or credit monitoring. But in our country, other than like the banking industry, the healthcare industry, some other industries that have special regulations, the Federal Trade Commission oversees the privacy policies. And if someone, like say AARP, where we take our data security extremely, extremely seriously, if we sold your information and our privacy policy said we would not, that's when we pay the fine. But if your bagel shop decides that it's going to sell your information because you're on their Bagel of the Month club, there isn't a law that says they can't. If they have a privacy policy that says they won't and they breach it, now they pay a fine. But if they don't, people say, well, oh, my right to privacy. There's some nuance to that. Yeah, good. When I said you can do these three things, you don't have to do anything else to be covered. That remains true. And those credit reporting bureaus, the credit monitoring services, like what the folks at U of M are getting, they basically do this. You give them access to your accounts and your credit account, and then they monitor it for you. They tell you if there are transactions. It gives you a heads up so you can meet that 60-day window. And then I'd just recommend, if you're deciding which one to use, go to Consumer Reports. They're a sort of non-biased, nonprofit publication that reviews especially tech services like that. Yeah. Annualcreditreport.com. Annualcreditreport.com. And grab one of those brochures that I laid out, and you can give them a call for any reminders. Another one, I'll wait until I get the hook here.
Is there an AARP office for the fraud watch network in every state?
So not every state runs the program the way I do here. Most of our states have some staff and volunteers who are out there educating people. And then our big center is in Denver, where they take all the reports and run that big call center. But yeah, it's aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork, and you can find it. Yeah.
Can people get information, like if you're talking to somebody you don't realize they're a scammer right away, can they get information off your phone about getting information like credit card numbers?
Yeah, good question. So is there danger to just talking with someone on the phone or answering opening an email? Generally not. And I'm trying to think of some old issues with the cellular network that would allow someone who really know what they were doing or was targeting a member of Congress. That's what they talked about on 60 Minutes, is that they could hack the cellular network and be able to listen to some member of Congress phone calls. That kind of stuff, the average consumer is not being targeted by any of that. No one's going to waste their time trying to do that on your phone or your computer. So it's more about that social engineering that gets people to share too much information. Over here.
About if you answered and you said yes, but then that gave them access.
It doesn't. I'm trying to remember the explanation for that, and it's different than one of my theories was they already stole your credit card number, and then they're going to charge it, and then when you dispute it, they're going to be able to defend it to the bank and keep the money. But that never came true, and I'm trying to remember what the other angle on that. But it's not the sensational thing that if you say yes, then they're going to use your voice for something, or it's more about verifying that the telephone number is legitimate so that they are going to sell your phone number because they know that you answered. So, yeah, not a big risk. Yes?
You mentioned Facebook Marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have insight on what is behind text me your phone number, text me,
So on Facebook Marketplace, sometimes when you're trying to buy something or sell something, they'll say, text me your phone number. Yeah, it's often that they are, like, one guy is the one who makes the posting and the other one is the one who does the texting. So they're just trying to get you in touch with the right person. But something that's more dangerous that people are getting involved with is the multi-factor authentication. So people think they're buying something online, and the seller, who's a scammer, says, we need to verify your identity, so I'm going to send you a 6-digit code, and I need you to send that back to me. What really that 6-digit code is the third factor authentication they need to access your Gmail account or your bank account, for that matter. So they're using that interaction. They already have your login and password, but they can't access your account without that 6-digit code. Yeah.
This is from the standpoint of selling stuff.
Same thing, yeah.
Well, when people respond, they'll say, oh, I'll pick it up right away today.
Yeah.
Message me if you want.
Yeah, I don't think that they're like building a database of phone numbers by getting buyers like this. It's because they want to do that third factor authentication scam on you. They want your text number so that when they try to log into your Google account, then they're going to ask for that 6-digit number. Yeah. Yeah, I posted some speakers for sale on Facebook, and 2 people responded within less than a minute. Both scammers. No one else was interested. Yeah. Yeah. Let's go over here.
So that AI story you were talking about, my daughter's mother-in-law called her. She said, "What hospital are you at? I got your text. Can you even speak? You lost your leg." I mean, she was sending money. And it was my daughter's voice that they had. It was awful because it sounded just like my daughter.
Did you hear it?
She let me listen to it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I do think it's happening. I just don't think it's really, happening elsewhere or on a grand scale. I think it was easy enough to convince people they were hearing a voice even before because it's such a shock. But I'm sorry that happened.
From Florida, my daughter was in Minneapolis, so
Yeah. Yeah. Well, last word is just if you can go home today and start a conversation with someone you trust about money, you'll be doing them a great service. And it's not what we're accustomed to, right? In a lot of our cultures, we don't talk about financial decisions, whether it's because we're humble or because we have this independence spirit about us. We don't have a lot of conversations about financial decisions. And if you can have more of them, you'll be keeping everyone else and yourselves safer. So thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Awesome presentation. Okay, we're going to wrap things up here. I want to say thank you to everyone for attending our 8th annual Reimagine Aging Conference. If you are a social worker, we do have CEUs at the check-in table, so be sure to grab those. You will be receiving an evaluation, and so do fill that out. We do take those very seriously, and we make plans for our next conference based on the feedback we get. Okay, now what you've been waiting for, the raffle prizes. It is my pleasure to introduce the behind-the-scenes person that makes this conference possible. Please join me in welcoming Becky Baskett, our Outreach and Program Marketing Coordinator.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you had a great time today. I know I had a lot of fun. I didn't get to hear as many presentations as I would hope, but that's why we recorded them. So keep an eye out in the next week to 10 days. We should have all of those recordings up online as well. Without further ado, let me start with our friends from Nura Pain Clinics. Hopefully you were able to stop by their table. They have a Minnie and Paul gift box that's being given away. I'm gonna let Deb do the honors here. We have Srividya. If I said that correctly, I apologize if I did not, but you were right there. Wonderful. Awesome.
Yay.
And then Senior Community Services, we are excited to have 3 gift cards today. The first is a $20 Cub Foods gift card. Take a look at the last 3 digits on your red ticket. First winner is 269. Yay!
All right.
Our second gift card is a $75 gift card for TGI Fridays. That winner is 296. Woohoo!
Yay, yay. Thank you.
And our third and final gift card is an American Express $100 gift card. And the lucky winner is number 268. I love it.
Oh, all right, volunteer photographer, yay.
Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you had a good time. And as Deb said, an evaluation will be emailed out within the next day or 2. Have a great afternoon. Enjoy the beautiful weather.
Thank you, everybody. All right.
Oh, hallelujah.
How are you doing?
I'm okay.
Yay.